You made it through 3 weeks. You got out of bed every morning. You answered texts. You told people you were fine, and somewhere in the middle of saying it, you almost believed it. And then week 4 arrived. You're standing in a parking lot, completely undone, because a stranger walked past wearing the same shampoo. You can't explain it. You can't rationalize it. You just fall apart. And the worst part isn't the crying, it's the thought that follows: why is this getting harder? Shouldn't I be getting better by now? If you're somewhere in that week 3 to 8 window right now, that strange, disorienting stretch where the initial shock has worn off but the pain hasn't, this video is for you. Not for the fresh wound of day 1. Not for the 6 months later version of you who's mostly okay. This is for the you who is right now living in what I call the dark middle. And I want to explain exactly what's happening inside your brain during this specific window, because once you understand it, it changes everything. You're not failing at healing. You're in the hardest neurological phase of the entire process. Here's the thing nobody tells you about breakups. The first 2 weeks aren't actually the hardest part neurologically. They feel brutal, the shock, the sleeplessness, the not eating, but your brain is flooded with stress hormones that function almost like a numbing agent. Cortisol, adrenaline, norepinephrine, they spike so high in the acute phase that your nervous system is essentially in crisis mode. And crisis mode has a strange mercy to it. It keeps you moving. It keeps you functional enough to survive. But around week 3 or 4, that flood begins to recede. And what's underneath it is where things get complicated. Let's talk about dopamine. Because this is the chemical at the center of everything you're feeling right now. During a relationship, your brain literally wires itself around your partner as a primary reward source. Every text, every touch, every shared laugh, your brain registered those as dopamine hits. Not metaphorically. Chemically. Your reward system, the same circuitry involved in food, warmth, and survival, learned to associate this specific person with pleasure and safety. So when the relationship ends, your brain isn't just sad. It's in withdrawal. Real, measurable, neurochemical withdrawal. The same kind researchers see in substance dependency studies. And here's where week 4 becomes its own specific kind of crisis. In the first 2 weeks, your cortisol was so elevated that it was actually masking how deep the dopamine withdrawal had gone. Think of it like a broken leg you don't feel yet because the shock is still in your system. Around week 3 or 4, the cortisol starts, just slightly, to normalize. And the moment that numbing agent steps back, the dopamine crash hits you at full volume. That's the parking lot moment. That's why it feels like you're going backwards. You're not going backwards. You're just finally feeling what was always there. A 2025 study published in the Journal of Affective Disorders scanned the brains of 94 people who had recently gone through breakups. When participants were shown photos of their ex-partners, the regions that lit up, the hippocampus and the amygdala, showed patterns almost identical to what researchers see in trauma survivors viewing images of their assault. Not similar. Almost identical. Which means your brain isn't being dramatic. It's processing this the way it processes genuine trauma. The pain is real. The panic is real. And it has a biological signature. You are not overreacting. You are responding exactly as a brain wired for deep attachment responds to loss. The study also found something else worth sitting with. The amygdala response was strongest in people who didn't initiate the breakup and who felt a sense of betrayal. Not just sadness, betrayal. Which means perceived injustice amplifies the trauma response significantly. If you're in this window and you're also carrying the weight of feeling like what happened to you wasn't fair, your brain is working even harder than most. It's not weakness. It's the specific neurological cost of being the one left behind, or the one deceived. That matters. That's worth naming out loud. Let's talk about oxytocin for a moment, because this one is quieter but just as devastating. Oxytocin is the bonding hormone. It's released during physical touch, during eye contact, during the small intimacies of a shared life, sleeping next to someone, the casual hand on the back, the inside jokes. Your brain doesn't just release oxytocin in the big moments. It releases it in the mundane ones, in the routine. So when the routine disappears, the oxytocin withdrawal hits you in the strangest, most ordinary places. The empty side of the bed at 7 a.m. The silence where a good morning text used to be. The dinner you don't know how to cook for one. And then there's serotonin, your mood stabilizer. The chemical that tells your nervous system that things are okay, that you're safe, that the world is manageable. Breakups disrupt serotonin significantly. And that disruption doesn't peak in week 1. It compounds over time as your sleep degrades and your imagined future starts to feel like a map of a country that no longer exists. By week 4, you might find yourself irritable in ways you can't explain. Snapping at people who don't deserve it. Crying at things that wouldn't normally move you. That's not you falling apart. That's low serotonin doing what low serotonin does. It's a chemical reality, not a character flaw. So let's hold all of that together for a moment. At week 4, you are simultaneously dealing with dopamine withdrawal from losing your brain's primary reward source, oxytocin withdrawal from the loss of physical and emotional bonding, and disrupted serotonin making your mood unstable and your nervous system raw. And on top of all of that, cortisol has been elevated for weeks, quietly wearing down your immune system, your sleep, your ability to think clearly. And the world is asking you to be fine. And you told them you were. And now you're not sure what's happening to you. That's the dark middle. That's what nobody maps out. Most people assume the hardest neurological phase of a breakup is the first 2 weeks. That's what popular culture tells us, the acute heartbreak, the dramatic first night. But the science actually suggests that weeks 3 through 8 are the phase where the most complex neurological work is happening. Your brain is simultaneously trying to lower its stress response and rebuild entirely new dopamine pathways that don't route through your ex-partner. It's doing 2 enormous things at once. It's exhausted. And so are you. And that exhaustion is not weakness, it's the cost of genuine neurological reconstruction. There's a concept in neuroscience called the reward prediction error. Basically, your brain is constantly running a background program that predicts when rewards are coming. For months, maybe years, that program was calibrated around this person. A certain time of day, a certain sound, a certain smell, and your brain would quietly anticipate them. When they're gone, the prediction fires anyway. And then nothing arrives. That gap, that moment of anticipation followed by absence, is neurologically painful in a very specific way. It's why a song can wreck you. It's why their shampoo on a stranger stops you cold. Your brain predicted a reward and got silence instead. And this is where I want to gently push back on something you might be telling yourself right now. You might be thinking, I should be stronger than this. I've been through hard things before. I know this person wasn't right for me. Why can't my brain just accept it? The answer is that acceptance is a cognitive process. It lives in the prefrontal cortex, the rational, thinking part of your brain. But withdrawal is a chemical process. It lives in the limbic system, the ancient emotional brain. And the brutal truth is, the limbic system doesn't care what the prefrontal cortex has decided. It just knows it's missing something it was wired to need. This is also why rebounds feel so compelling in this window, and why they so often fail. When your dopamine system is depleted, any new source of dopamine feels like salvation. Someone new pays attention to you, and your brain lights up like it hasn't in weeks. But that's not connection. That's a starving system grabbing the nearest available food. And it doesn't address the rewiring that still needs to happen. The first relationship after a breakup, what some people call the bad pancake, is almost always a practice run. Not because you're incapable of love, but because your reward system is still calibrated around someone else. The new person deserves better than being someone else's dopamine patch. So what does actually help? Because I don't want to just name the problem and leave you in it. The research on neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself, is genuinely hopeful. Your brain can rebuild. It does rebuild. But the rebuilding requires specific inputs, and week 4 is actually a critical window for beginning them. Not because you're suddenly going to feel better, but because the choices you make in this phase start laying the neural groundwork for who you'll be at month 3, month 6, a year from now. The work you do in the dark middle is invisible. But it's real. And it matters more than most people know. The first thing that actually moves the needle on dopamine recovery is physical movement. Not because exercise is a magic cure, but because it's one of the only reliable ways to trigger dopamine release that doesn't involve your ex-partner. Even 20 minutes of walking raises dopamine and serotonin measurably. It's not about getting fit. It's about giving your reward system something real and accessible to respond to. Something that isn't a text notification. Something that isn't checking their social media. Your body is one of the few dopamine sources you still have full access to. Use it, even imperfectly, even reluctantly. The second is social contact, and I want to be specific here, because not all social contact is equal in this phase. Passive social media scrolling actually increases cortisol and loneliness. But real, present conversation, even a 20-minute phone call with someone who knows you, releases oxytocin. It won't replace what you lost. But it begins to teach your brain that oxytocin can come from sources other than one specific person. That's not replacing them. That's rebuilding your nervous system's range. And that's not just helpful, it's necessary for the rewiring to happen at all. The third, and this one is harder to hear, is limiting contact with your ex. Not because it's a rule someone made up, but because every time you check their profile, read old messages, or reach out, your brain fires that reward prediction circuit again. It anticipates. And then it gets silence, or worse, a response that confuses everything. The dopamine crash that follows checking is deeper than if you hadn't checked at all. No contact isn't punishment. It's neurological protection. It's giving your reward system the space to stop predicting a reward that isn't coming. That's not giving up on them. That's giving your brain a chance to heal. And the fourth is something that might sound almost too simple: sleep. Chronic cortisol elevation disrupts the sleep architecture that allows your hippocampus to process emotional memories. When you're not sleeping properly, you're not just tired. You're preventing your brain from doing the overnight emotional processing that is literally part of how it heals. The research on this is clear: sleep deprivation after trauma extends the recovery timeline significantly. So protecting your sleep, even imperfectly, even with help, isn't indulgent. It's clinical. It's one of the most direct things you can do to support the neurological work that's already happening, whether you're aware of it or not. I want to come back to something the research said about the recovery timeline, because I think it's important to hear this honestly. Full neurochemical recovery from a significant relationship, the kind where your brain had genuinely wired itself around this person, takes 12 to 18 months. not to feel okay, not to stop crying, but for your brain to rebuild 5 interconnected neural systems: the dopamine reward circuits, the oxytocin bonding pathways, the serotonin regulation system, the stress response mechanisms, and the memory consolidation processes in the hippocampus. 12 to 18 months. Longer relationships take longer. That's not pessimism. That's just the biology of love. But here's what I want you to hold on to, and this is the reframe I want to leave you with. The intensity of what you're feeling at week 4 isn't evidence that you're broken. It's evidence of how real the attachment was. Your brain doesn't go into withdrawal over things that didn't matter. It doesn't rewire itself around people who were just convenient. The depth of the crash is, in a strange and painful way, a measure of the depth of what you built. You loved someone enough that your nervous system encoded them into its basic functioning. That's not pathetic. That's profoundly human. And the brain that is crashing right now, the one that's crying in parking lots and waking at 3 a.m. and flinching at songs, that same brain is also the one that will rebuild. Neuroplasticity isn't just a recovery concept. It's a promise. The same capacity for deep attachment that's causing you this pain is the same capacity that will eventually wire itself around something new. Around yourself, first. Around your own life, your own rhythms, your own sources of meaning. And then, when you're ready, and not a moment before, around someone else. That's not a consolation prize. That's the actual destination. And you're already moving toward it, even when it doesn't feel like it. So if you're in week 4 right now, or week 5, or week 7, and you're wondering why this feels like it's getting worse instead of better, I want you to know, you're not failing at healing. You're in the hardest neurological window of the entire process, doing the most invisible work, with the least external validation. The acute phase had its own terrible clarity. The later months will have their own visible progress. But right now, you're in the middle, and the middle is where the real rewiring happens. It's just quiet. And it's just hard. And that's okay. You don't have to perform recovery. You just have to keep going. One thing you can do today, just one, is write down 3 things that gave your brain a genuine dopamine signal this week. Not scrolling. Not checking their profile. Not replaying old conversations. 3 real things: a meal that tasted good, a moment of sunlight, a conversation that made you feel less alone. You're not looking for joy. You're looking for signal. You're teaching your reward system that there are other sources. That's not moving on. That's just keeping the lights on while the rewiring happens. And right now, keeping the lights on is enough. In my next video, I'll walk through what months 2 and 3 actually look like neurologically, and why so many people mistake a temporary plateau for permanent damage. Subscribe so you don't miss it. You're not there yet. But you will be.